Hey there, members of the Night Crew and folks who just love horror. Welcome to the Night Crew podcast, where shadows breathe and monsters listen. This is the podcast where we get cozy with the creepy, the frightening, and the just plain undead. I'm your host, Brad Ricks. So I've done a lot of housekeeping in the past couple episodes. I'm going to keep it short this time. Go join my Facebook group. There'll be a link in the show notes and or just go to Facebook, search for Brad Ricks' Book Crypt. You'll find it. It's easy. Oh, and I'm also on TikTok. Don't forget that. All right. That's enough. So, on today's episode, I sat down with author Cassandra O'Sullivan Sachar. She's a Stoker-nominated academic author. Her novels include Darkness There, But Something More, Keeper of Corpses, along with a number of other novellas and collections and anthologies. We're going to talk about her work as a professor, her absolute love of Poe, and also how much she loves editing. I know, it's weird. All right, into the virtual studio we go. All right, so tonight I am thrilled to have Cassandra O'Sullivan Sachar joining me. Cassandra, how are you this evening?
It's been a long day, but I am happy to be here and happy to just share some thoughts and have a good conversation about horror.
Hey, man, I know. So long day. So usually I start off with tell me about your writing, but, some of your what you do for your career is also quite exciting from the writing standpoint. So tell us a little bit about your day job and some of the wonderfully cool classes that they have let you teach.
Well, no English professor ever gets really excited about telling everyone that she teaches freshman composition. I do that and I care about it deeply, but most people are not very interested in that. So what people are excited about is that I also teach creative writing, and specifically sometimes I get to teach a horror writing class. And I am teaching it this semester, and it is just so much fun. And you remember you were there one time.
I know. I did do I got to talk to her class once, and it was a very insightful group of students.
Yeah, it's in the honors college, and a lot of these students don't particularly have an interest in horror. They just take the class. If you hear that sound, that is one of my cats just having a moment. He's fine. Nobody is torturing him. He's just being louder than he could possibly be. So anyway, though,
it's all good.
Horror class.
We'll call it's mood music for the horror podcast.
And it's even better because he is my black cat.
Nice.
So black cat making weird yowling sounds is exactly the vibe that I wanted to project.
It's that brand.
But so my horror class, a lot of the students in the honors college need to take these honors classes, and they just sign up and, here's a class. And they don't necessarily have an interest in horror when they get started. And so it's always interesting to me at the beginning of the semester because they're very tentative. They're writing more cozy horror, a little bit spooky. But then by the end of the semester, oh my gosh, they're pulling out eyeballs. There are spiders crawling underneath their skin. They get so gross and are having fun with it. And I always say, you need to choose your own type of horror. So I am always interested in letting students have some say in the kind of writing that they do. Since it's a horror class, it must be horror. But I have some students who really like fantasy, and so they do a little fantasy horror. I have sci-fi horror, and I allow that because ultimately I want them leaving the class feeling good about the writing that they've done. And they do.
When it comes to horror, I mean, there is such a wide breadth that people don't realize that is everything from you can have horror in a fantasy setting, you can have horror in a sci-fi setting, there's such a wide field for them to kind of delve into.
Absolutely. And I enjoy, as a writer myself, I have a wide range. I enjoy literary horror at times, and other times I'm the one doing weird, gross eyeball stuff and just making things way more disgusting than they need to be necessarily, but I'm having fun with it. And that is, for me, a lot of the backbone of my horror is that I like to have some fun with it. That's not to say that all of mine is fun. I have some which is devastating, some which is very bleak. I won't say which ones, but some of my reviews have been, well, it was really good, but depressing. I'm like, well, it's horror. But I also do horror comedy. I do realistic horror. I do supernatural. I do cursed objects. I do revenge killings. I love writing short stories. And the reason I love it so much is that I love that freedom to explore so many different worlds. That's my favorite. Versus with a novel, you're there with the same world for so long, with the same characters. And I haven't written a longer work for a while, but as soon as my semester's over, I'm diving in.
Nice. So I got one more question when it comes to the classroom. So you said, as towards the end by the time the semester's wrapping up, they're writing stuff that's doing all that, the eyeballs and spiders on the skin. Do they get into a competition on who can get the most, like the grossest or the, who or the most extreme, or is there does some little rivalry and competition start to occur?
Well, I wouldn't say competition, because one thing is that they pretty much work within the same groups for most of the semester, but tomorrow is our open mic day. And so each of them will just be reading a short snippet from their story. And I of course, have read all of their stories by this time, and the people in their small groups have read their stories, but the rest of the class doesn't have a darn clue what they're working on. And so I'm really excited to see what they choose, because some of them truly have some horrific, awful things happening. And what I always tell them, if I have a physical reaction to one of their stories, I make sure to write that in my comment, because for me, when I'm making a face of disgust, or when I'm sad, or when I'm moved, something's happened, and I want to let them know.
In my head, I'm seeing a little bit of the gross out competition from.
Nobody's writing about we have rules. There are certain. I tell them, if you want to write about anything X-rated, make your own version. Do not turn it into Dr. Sachar. I will be very embarrassed. So there are rules. I tell them, and they're like, what about bad language? I'm like, somebody's getting their leg cut off. They're going to drop an F-bomb. That's fine. So there are rules. I don't want, obviously, any sort of racial slurs, anything that, even if their character is horrible, because some of them ask and they're checking. They're thinking of a horrible character, but wouldn't they say this? And I say, well, they might very well say that, but you ultimately are in control of what your characters do. And somebody might read your work and have thoughts about you, which that is a whole conversation. But, guidelines, lines, but ultimately they get a lot of freedom. That
is wonderful. And like I said, I did have a chance to sit in on her class a year or so ago now. And
I think it was 2024 was the last time I taught that class.
Yeah. And it was a blast. They had an excerpt of Fear Not the Dead, and, they went through and had a bunch of questions about it. So it was a fun experience. So now shifting back away from the class and, kind of focus it back on you. So tell me about your writing career. How long have you been doing it? What was your first book? What made you want to become a writer?
So I wrote before I could write. And what I mean by that, I should say I told stories before I could write. And so my first book, it was a picture book, I wrote when I was not quite 3. And it was Halloween. My birthday's in November, so Halloween is very close to my birthday. And I loved Halloween right away. My mom loved Halloween. My mom is not a horror person whatsoever. But for some reason, she makes an exception for Halloween. And so my book was called Cat's Halloween. I still have a copy of it somewhere in a trunk in my basement, my spooky, spooky basement that has a very spooky crawl space, which was inspiration for a short story. But she would write down what I wanted her to write. I would draw pictures. The pictures are hilarious because I was not quite 3. That was just something we did until I could write for myself. And then when I was a kid, I just didn't stop. I kept writing. Even when I was in 3rd grade, I was trying to write chapter books, and I would get pretty far and then I would lose interest and stop. And so I finished my first novel when I was in college. I was 21 and pregnant with my daughter, who is now so much older than I was then. And I just really, the motivation for me actually starting and finishing that novel was thinking, I'm about to be a mom. I'm going to be responsible for somebody. This is my last shot for a while to get it done. And I know lots of moms of young kids who are writers and whatnot, but to me, it was, don't waste this summer. I have to finish the book this summer. Now, nothing happened with that book until 2024. That was much later because I wrote it in 1998. So I tried to get it published. I did the whole self-addressed stamped envelope sort of thing and all of that nonsense. And nothing, there were a few bites, but nothing ever happened. And then every few years I would go back to it. And then I wrote another novel and another novel. Didn't have any luck. And then I kind of gave up on being a writer for a while, and I turned to other scholarship. I got my doctorate in education with a specialization in literacy. So I wrote tons of practitioner pieces, did research studies on writing interventions. And then I just decided, okay, well, I'm an academic writer. This is what I do. But it was during the pandemic where I just kept getting ideas for a novel, which eventually became Darkness, There Was Something More. And my first thought was, you don't do this anymore. I wanted to keep pushing it away. It was, the ideas were coming at me. I'd be on the elliptical and I can't concentrate on the book I'm reading because I keep thinking about all this stuff. And then finally, I was walking across campus one day to my very, very sad classroom where all the desks were 6 feet apart. I was one of the only, this is spring 2021. I was one of the only professors teaching an in-person class, but my class dwindled. So many students just stopped coming because they were so used to zooming in everywhere else. But I was walking across campus and it just hit me like a bolt of lightning. I need to go back to being a writer. But for me, knowing that what I had been doing wasn't working, I decided, and also part of me was thinking about my career and the fact that already I was in the English department. It was a really good pivot for me to go back to grad school, get an MA in fiction, get an MFA in creative writing, and now I get to teach creative writing too. And I got a few books published as well. So for me, and I always say for everybody, because I know it's not realistic for everybody to go into a formal program. But what I always tell everybody is if what you're doing isn't working, try something different. Join a writing group. Take some free creative writing classes at a library. Do some self-study. Get feedback on your writing instead of just writing into the void. And for me, what it took was just really focusing on my writing. I considered myself a strong writer. I taught writing, but I was teaching composition. And so I really needed to dig deeper into the process. And for me, really, I've done all this research on feedback. And for some reason, I was just writing and sending it out to editors and not actually getting feedback from other people. So I wasn't following my own advice, all the research, all that good stuff. Nope.
It's funny how we do that sometimes.
I know. But I finally figured it out. And now a lot of times I work with writers, obviously young writers, and I have a lot of advice for them. And I'm really proud of them in terms of, I have a lot of students who have started their own writing groups, critique groups. I'm pushing them to submit their work. I have there's a display case in the building where I teach, and I put up pictures of students who have gotten their work published, and they get their picture and their bio and a cover of whatever magazine or journal or anthology that their work has been published in. And I just think it's such a cool thing for these students. They're graduating and they already have some publications, some of them.
That is amazing.
And if they don't get published, I tell them, let's talk about rejection. What happens? I just said yesterday in class, I said, so what happens if you submit your work? You could get rejected, yeah. But if you don't submit your work, you will not get published. Like that's guaranteed.
What was it Stephen King, I think, said when, he used to send out he'd get the rejection letters back and he would nail them to the wall. And when he got so many, he just got a bigger nail.
Yeah, I remember that.
So talk a little bit about your books. So I know I'm a huge fan of Darkness There, but Something More. Yeah, that was, I think, that was the first one I read from you, was that one before I read the Keeper of Corpses. I know it's very much Poe inspired, which I'm a huge Poe fan. And I know you're a huge Poe fan. So tell me a little bit about the inspiration for that one. Give us your elevator pitch.
All right. Darkness There, But Something More is about an Edgar Allan Poe scholar and college English professor who's gone through some difficult life events. And so she needs a fresh start. She takes a new job at the university where she went as an undergrad, and things start going better for her for a while until one of her students goes missing and turns up dead. She's pulled into the investigation, and it starts making her think about things that happened when she was in college at the same university, Blackthorn University, which is in my fictional town that I use in lots of books in Blackthorn, Pennsylvania. I am a Pennsylvania girl, grew up in Kutztown, live in Bloomsburg now, so a lot of my writing is Pennsylvania-centric. But so she gets pulled into this investigation of the student's death, starts thinking about what happened when she was in college, and some unfortunate memories begin to surface. So cue the dual timeline. Marissa in the present is an English professor. Marissa in the past is a college student pledging a sorority. And in both timelines, there's darkness there, but something more. Like the line, of course, similar to the line from Poe's The Raven, but he says darkness there and nothing more. But for Marissa, there's something more, despite everything. And I have a tattoo, which I'm not going to try to show you because it's on my ankle, and I just am not up for that kind of contortion.
It's okay. This is
at this time of the evening.
It's an audio only podcast. It's fine. They won't get to see it anyway.
Well, you can see what it looks like if they look at the cover of Darkness There, But Something More, because there is a raven. And what I told the cover designer at the time, and I am not an artist. I am just not. But I told him, I said, a raven and a university, and it's fall and a moon. That is all I said. And he came up with something that to me is just so vivid and eye-catching. And so I loved what the cover looks like. And that's one reason that I got the tattoo. But also I love what it stands for, because we do go through, life is difficult. By a certain point in our lives, we have all gone through some sort of trauma. We have all dealt with just awful things, and we have had to move on. Or if not move on, we've had to keep going. And so to me, the cover, the tattoo, that raven in particular, it is that push to be resilient. There is something more beyond the darkness. Look, I'm a horror writer. I love horror, but it can't just be darkness. And that is something I really try to keep in mind when things get difficult. And it's something that I try to help others deal with, such as my students, when they're really dealing with some outside of school stuff. But meanwhile, here they are as a student. And if they're not being serious about their work, they could lose a scholarship, lose their placement, any sort of thing. And so it's really focusing on what's beyond the darkness.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's, I love that. That's a really, really great. So, let's see. Sorry, I lost I was scrolling through some of my notes and I lost my track of notes. I was sitting there listening. I was like, this is so interesting.
Thinking about beyond the darkness, because it's a big deal.
So now I know you recently have done, you've done a number of anthologies. So kind of talk about your process with that. How do you pick the topic? The stories. Do you like doing some of the anthology stuff more than writing your own stories?
So I'm a very good editor. Now I say that and that sounds obnoxious, but here's what I mean. I've been doing it so long because I've been teaching my entire career. And sometimes I just know when I read somebody's writing, I know what needs to be done to make it sound better, to have more coherence, to come full circle or not. And sometimes for me, it's much easier to see that with somebody else's writing than my own writing. Now, I have a process for that too, of course. But so I really just, it's almost like a puzzle for me sometimes where I think, and if it's somebody else's work, I'm not rewriting their work. It needs to be theirs. And I tell students, I tell authors I work with, I say, look, it's your writing. I am not going to tell you what you have to do. You don't need to listen to every single piece of advice that I give you. Well, you don't need to act on it. You should listen to it.
You should listen to it, but yeah.
You should consider it. And in fact, my daughter, Serena, was one of my writers for one anthology. She was one of 20 writers who were featured in Dark and Dreary. I had a lapse where I was like, oh my gosh, what is it called? It's Dark and Dreary, a basement horror anthology. I think basements are terrifying. I mentioned my basement. It is creepy and dusty, and there's this giant hole in the wall where there's a crawl space, and it is just what nightmares are made of. I have never been in the crawl space. My husband has. I will never go in the crawl space. It's terrifying. But it really did. To this day, I am afraid of basements. I am. It's ridiculous. It's embarrassing. But if I'm in the basement, my heart starts beating faster. I just need to get out. Also, my basement is very dusty and I have asthma. I also really should get out, and I can blame it on that and not say that I'm just being ridiculous and a scaredy cat. But my daughter wrote a story, as I said, for the anthology, and I disagreed on her having this one character. And I just said, this one character isn't adding anything to the story. She would be better just cut out. And my daughter pushed back, and I was actually proud of her about this. And we were having this conversation, just talking versus everybody else I'm communicating with over the keyboard. But she said, no, I want her to stay in it for this reason. And I said, okay. Well, if she's so important to the main character, you need to show that. You need to develop her. And so I appreciated that she stuck up for her character and developed her. And that's the sort of give and take that I like to have with authors, where I'll give a little push here. Hey, what if you tried this? What if you do this? And then they can take it or leave it. And ultimately, the decisions are up to them. But I'm here to give suggestions. I'm here to try to help them put pieces together, sew up holes, or connect things in a different way. And that, to me, nothing makes me happier than when a writer says, I tried this and I like my story so much better. And I just think, that is so nice. I just love that process. I love being able to help push people in a different direction, or just a little bit of a better direction. When it comes to my own writing, I can at times be that editor for myself if enough time has passed. But you know how it is when I very much prefer revising my work to writing it. I am a very messy writer. I am a pantser. I write fiction so much differently than I write horror scholarship or writing research, or I do it so differently than I do my editing. I'm very type A in most aspects of life, not when it comes to my writing. I have sat down at the computer having no idea what I was going to do, and then I just do something, and half of it's garbage, but I need to get the words out in front of me on the screen, and then I write the whole story. And then I breathe a giant sigh of relief, and then I go back and I make it good, or at least better. Good depends on your perspective, but I make it better. And so I'm a very messy writer on the first draft. And Anne Lamott, famous essayist, has that one wonderful essay. It's called Shitty First Drafts. And I very much, I have a version of that I do in my classes, my composition classes. I call it the rough draft, so I don't have to swear. But
I've also heard it called draft zero.
Yeah, but this is just, it's not the draft that you bring to class. It's not the draft that you give on workshopping day if you're creative writing, or peer review day if it's academic or composition writing. But it is just getting things out of your head and onto the page. And that, to me, can be painful at times. But then I have a lot more fun with it when those pieces are coming together and I'm seeing, aha, here's how I can make it work. I love that.
I think Neil Gaiman, has a quote that's something like, he writes the first draft and, just to get the story out. And he writes the second draft knowing as if he knew what was going to happen the whole time.
Yeah. I mean, I've definitely gone back and added foreshadowing and done this and with darkness there, but something more. That's an example that I wrote that when I was in my MFA program and I was teaching full time and everything was crazy. And I had to produce X number of pages and turn them in every so many weeks. And there were times, and I am not a procrastinator. I've never been a procrastinator, but I just didn't have enough time. And so there were times I'm writing here. Meanwhile, I don't really know where I'm going. I haven't figured out. I had this one idea. There's this scene in the past where Marissa is going to tell this big secret. I wrote that scene. I didn't know what the secret was.
You're like, come on, character, start talking.
Like, I don't know. And I needed a little time and space from it before I could make more sense of it. And so I do think that it really did come together well, but that was a book that had many drafts and it had a lot of cutting out big sections and then adding other ones and trying something different here. And so that book was a lot of work. It is near and dear to my heart. It is what made me a published novelist. And so I will always, always just have such a special place for it. And it's very meaningful to me. It is the book, whenever I go and do book events, it is the book I sell the most of almost always. I say Edgar Allan Poe scholar and people are like, oh, I say dark academia, and people often are into that too. Get that cover. But I have other books.
It is a great cover.
I have two you can see, Brad.
I can see.
Who else can see? But yes, Lake of Secrets is another one with a beautiful, beautiful cover. And that's a paranormal mystery that takes place in the present. It's YA. My main character is 17. She's about to be a senior in high school and she gets sent off to live in the country for the summer with an elderly relative. And she's all mad about it. Like, oh, I want to be with my friends and the town is boring. But she stumbles upon a mystery of a teenager who supposedly unalived herself in the 90s. And my main character, Callie, says, that's not adding up. And so she investigates the mystery and then close the doors over on this side. And that's a psychological horror novella. And it's about a single mom who goes to a yoga class and accidentally opens a door and she should close that door. And that's one where it's a possession novella. I will say that, but I will also say there are no priests and no demons. So I really, really tried to transcend tropes here and do my own thing.
Nice. So one thing I do want to ask. So, when I started the podcast, I was just like, or I started this episode and I just said, hey, Cassandra, I should have started with, the Stoker nominated Cassandra. So, I know, was it last year you were nominated for Stoker. So how did that feel?
Well, that was very awesome. It was terrible. No.
It's such a bad experience.
I hated it. Please don't give me any accolades. So the Stoker nomination was for my horror scholarship book, No More Haunted Dolls, horror fiction that transcends tropes. You did just hear me say transcend tropes. I did. Very big on transcending tropes and thinking of tropes. And I love tropes. I think they're so much fun. But I just don't want the same thing all the time. So I love when people have layers and do something different. And so I had 14 horror scholars from around the world. I mean, this was truly an international book. It was so cool. There was one from India, one from Germany. maybe 2 from Germany. No, 1 dropped out. 1 from Austria, 1 from England, 1 from other countries, Spain, somewhere else I'm also forgetting. And of course, yes, a bunch of Americans too. But they all wrote a chapter on different either movies, books, or movies and books, and examined how did the authors or actors or directors or whatever transcend tropes or not. And it was published with Vernon Press, and it got a Stoker nomination. It did not win, but I will truly say, as I sat there at the table at the Stoker Award banquet last year, I did honestly think it was a pleasure to be nominated. I wasn't even sad. They called the name. It was not me. But I thought, I'm just happy to be here. So I do have another horror scholarship book on the way. I don't have a release date for it yet. I am waiting. I have gotten a cover reveal, so I'm very excited about that. And the theme of this one is body horror. And so the name of it, we changed the title. So now I'm blanking out on what the heck the name is. I could tell the old title, but that wouldn't be very helpful. I know what it is. I couldn't find the picture, but I remember. Dissecting Body Horror, Essays on Violation and Meaning. Sometime this year, I'm not quite sure when, that will be out. And there are works from several different horror scholars examining depictions of body horror in books and film.
Nice.
Yeah, and that will be published with McFarlane and Company.
I love the little, like that whole dissecting body horror, because it's a little tongue in cheek in its title there.
Yeah. So that is, again, I don't actually have a chapter in that one. I am the editor. It was my idea. Body horror is something I find fascinating. I watched Lee Cronin's The Mummy a couple weeks ago. It is gross. I loved it. I mean, I was making faces and whatnot during the movie, but it's revolting. It can be scary because we imagine this happening to ourselves. And so I just think it's a very interesting topic, and hopefully it will resonate with readers. We'll see. We'll see.
After see if I can get 2-time nominated.
Well, let's just say that it was motivational to do a second book.
I would imagine so. So how would you say your writing style or process has changed over the years?
Well, something that is very important, and I'm sure you probably went through this as well, is that once you do the first book, you realize, oh, hey, I can write a book. It's not some far off dream anymore. In a way, it's like running a marathon. Once you've run a marathon, you know you can run a marathon. You just have to do the training for it. And so I am a former marathon runner. I stopped that, but I ran 3 marathons. And after that first one, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do it. But then I did it. And I did it. I was able to do it because I took the steps I needed to take. So even though, as I said, I'm a very messy first drafter, it's obviously not all about the first draft or the second draft or the third draft. Sometimes, there are a whole bunch of drafts. And so for me, I know this summer that I am going to write probably not a full novel. I have this idea for a story, and I'm picturing it as a novella. And I already have an editor lined up, and I have a due date of August 1st. I have written 0 words, and that's intentional. I don't have time right now to write and do everything that I need to do for my job. But soon, this semester is over, and I will be focusing on this novella that I want to write, as well as working on editing the anthology that is going to come out probably in September, because I am the editor, I am the publisher of that, and I know that I will get it done. The only person I really need to count on is myself and my husband, because he's the formatter. And of course the authors, but again, the authors have done a good deal of their work because they submitted. So now we're just going to work on making it better. So I very much have a process for being an editor. I go through one round. I go through the first round, give overall feedback. Then I send it back to them. Then we work on those some problem areas. Then I do another round. So I really do a whole developmental round. I do a more line editing round, and I do a proofreading round. And all of that takes a lot of time. But it's a different part of my brain than when I'm writing myself. And so when I'm writing myself, as I said, that first messy draft, it is just getting it out. But I will put in the time. And sometimes I just give myself the goal. If it's a writing day, and you probably run circles around me because look at you popping out books left and right. On a writing
I had
day.
a lot queued up. My queue's about to be empty.
Okay. All right.
I'm sitting I'm every day at the computer trying to crank out this novel I'm working on now. But because I'm like, I don't have anything else in the queue right now.
Yeah. Which is a weird feeling when, for me, it was short stories where I just had so many short stories and I wasn't getting them published anywhere. And then I got them all published. And now I have one short story that doesn't have a home. And that's it. And I've sent it somewhere. So we'll see. Supposed to find out by the end of May. But at one time I had like 15 short stories that didn't have homes. And I was sending them out, trying to find good places for them. And now I've written so many short stories and they've all been published or accepted for publication except for one. And I'm not mad about that, but also, oh, hey, I should write some more short stories. When I'm not editing that book or the other book or writing my own book, but it will happen.
Or teaching classes and grading papers. And
Yeah, time. I'm very good at filling my time. I truly am never bored. Seriously. I never say I'm bored.
a lot of writers, I feel that's the case. We all tend to fill our time with something, whether it's writing, reading, something to, it's like the little rat in our head just has to keep chugging away.
I'm just picturing a rat now. I want it to be not a rat, but I think you're right. I think it's a rat. I want it to be like a cute little chipmunk, but it's a rat.
Or we write horror. It's not nothing cute.
I have this at work. I have many skulls that are actually with me right now because I write by my circle of skulls. But I have this one skull at work. And it's pink and sparkly, but also it's a skull. So it's creepy. And so I say, when students are like, what's that? I say, well, it's a little bit like me. I'm a little bit pink and sparkly, but also dark and creepy.
Yeah, so there you go.
Who I am. And I'm fine with that.
So I do like to ask this question, but I feel like I probably already know the answer to it. But of all the books that you've written, what would you say is your favorite?
People always ask that. And I say, that's like asking about your favorite child.
Favorite child. Yes.
But I only have one child. And so she knows she's my favorite child. She's also my least favorite sometimes. But
I've got a house full of kids that when they ask, they go, which one's our favorite? I go, whichever one's not asking me if they're my favorite.
Yeah. And I'm one of 5 kids. So 1 kid versus 5 is obviously a lot different. I mean, the one that is nearest and dearest to my heart is Darkness There, but Something More. But I have to, and my main character, Marissa, is the most like me compared to other characters from other books. I mean, Callie is like me when I was 17, a little bit. She's 17. I am not 17. Multiples of 17. So there's that. Then Natalie is the main character from Close the Door. She's a single mom, has lots of really strong qualities, but I purposely made her different from me in a lot of ways. And I did that because I don't want every character to be a
mirror
myself. Yeah. And I mean, you mentioned Stephen King earlier. We know that so many of Stephen King's main characters are writers who have had trouble with alcohol, whether that's in the present or the past. And some of his best characters are characters who are like him in some ways. And so I don't want everybody to be like me, but also I have to find something that relates to every character. And so again, in my short stories, and I have so many short stories, many of which you've read. Mm-hmm. But even when I have a character who's a bad character, now something in my longer works that I've written, I haven't had, maybe somebody else feels differently, but none of my main characters have been bad people. Not true in my short stories. Some of them are very selfish. Some of them are evil. They are not good people. But even those characters, I need to find some sort of way to connect to them and get into their heads. So for example, I have one short story. I can't even remember what it's called right now, but my main character does a very, very bad thing. And the story takes place, you don't know it for most of the time, but the story takes place in hell. And in hell, Phil Collins music is playing. And that is my connection to that character. She and I do not care for the music of Phil Collins. Phil Collins music also is in a different story where the character is not a likable character whatsoever. This one is called Ringtone, and it is in Wicked Universe, as well as Prepare, which is horror anthology with all writers from Wicked House Publishing. And then I also have that short story published in one of my collections, Prepare the Coffin, Tales of the Macabre. And again, it's not a good person. That story is my love letter to Poe's The Telltale Heart. There are some connections there. But once again, the music of Phil Collins inspires bad things. So even something silly like that, I want to try to make the characters realistic, and adding some little quirk or dislike or whatever that I can relate to them, to me, that helps it. And so my whole thing, even when elements of a story are just completely unbelievable, fantastical, there are zombies, I want to have these nuggets of reality to ground the reader and to make the reader feel like this could be real. So that lull them into the suspension of disbelief. I am all about that.
So here's one I haven't asked this question in a while, so I'd love to get your opinion on this one. If you could pick someone to do a collaboration with, who would it be?
I have done collaborations in academic writing. This would be very different. So what are my options? My options are...
Sky's the limit.
I mean, Shirley Jackson, she's dead, but did she come back? Of course, really what I want to say is Poe. Mm. But I also feel that as a woman, Shirley Jackson is such an important figure in horror. So I'm going to go with Shirley Jackson. Now, the truth is that I don't know her work as intimately as I know Poe's work. Mm-hmm. I mean, I used to teach high school. 10th grade was my year that I taught. I taught 9th and 10th grade for 14 years. But I think some years I didn't teach 9th grade, but I always taught 10th grade that whole time. And 10th grade was American literature. I had a big yellow literature book. We had Mask of the Red Death in that, which is amazing. Mm-hmm. There were other stories by Poe. And so some of his work I have just read so many times, and I know it so well. And so, man, there's some great stuff in there. There really is. So actually, I'm going to go with him first and then Shirley Jackson. And in both scenarios, they're going to listen to me because they're ghosts. So only I can write the words. They're just giving me ideas here and there and lurking around being creepy. And that sounds great.
Hey, and
oh my gosh, how cool would that be?
I feel a short story going on.
I do love Poe. I actually had a dream about Poe once that I was on a campus, not the campus where I work, and I was hosting a literary event, and I was talking to this colleague, and we're saying, yeah, I don't know if he's going to come. He didn't respond to the invitation. Now, I don't know, because it was a dream. I don't know in this dream if he was alive, if he was dead, but all I know is that we invited him and it looked like he wasn't coming. But then across the quad, I thought that I saw him and I was so excited. But then he turned around and it turned out it was not Poe. It was a woman wearing a sexy Edgar Allan Poe costume. And you could tell from the back because they were pants in front, but not pants in the back. And I was just like, oh my gosh, what is that? And was very disappointed. And that's my brain. I don't know why.
Oh, that's funny. All right. So kind of shifting gears. So I started the night.
You don't want to hear more about sexy Edgar Allan Poe outfits? What?
I am halfway curious to go into Amazon later and see if I can find those actually exist.
I hope not. I won't describe
I hope not. Yeah, they only exist in Cassandra's brain, hopefully.
Well, I was very surprised the first time that I saw a sexy Freddy Krueger outfit. I thought, what?
I'm not.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg.
I'm actually typing
Freddy
right
Krueger
now.
is not
Sexy Edgar Allan. There's a sexy Edgar Allan Poe dress.
I'm afraid of what you might find.
It just looks kind of like just Gothic style dresses that are short and low cut kind of thing.
That's not Edgar Allan Poe. That's the sort of thing where if you put a search like that into Google now, you're going to get the, not that we request the AI overview, but then it will say something like, this is an inappropriate question.
No, what's going to happen is now my Facebook algorithms are going to keep showing me like, Edgar Allan Poe's sexy stuff. And I'm going to be like, what? No. And so you just messed up my Facebook now. All right. So I started the podcast, as a spinoff to my series, The Night Crew, which is all about monster hunters. So, I always like to ask all of the authors that come in to tell me what your favorite monster is. So Dr. Sachar, what is your favorite horror monster?
I mean, this sounds like a very English professor answer, but I am going to go with Frankenstein's monster, aka the creature. From Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, because I just think it is such a classic example of misunderstood. That character has depth. In creative writing classes, we talk about round characters versus flat characters, and it's not. We have so many monsters that are just, and we don't know why they're killing. Are they, what is their motivation? A lot of times we don't know. But in the creature's case, we see that loneliness. We see that confusion and isolation. And it's just, I haven't read Frankenstein for a long time, but of course, I've seen various movies and whatnot of it. But I think back to that story and think how compelling it is, where we are misunderstood. In a way, we're all monsters and we're all not monsters. And it is about perspective, and it's about how we were treated and trauma and just so many other factors. So, in a heartbeat.
Well, and now I haven't seen like all the Frankenstein movies that are out because, I think that would take forever because there's a lot of them. But most of the movies tend to more so lean on the creature as a monster, as, is out of control and wild and, where the book doesn't. And so it's interesting why, I don't know why there is typically that kind of chasm between what really the book is about versus what we end up typically getting in a movie format.
Couldn't we say this of almost every book to movie adaptation? There are exceptions. I will say Forrest Gump, I read the book. The movie's like nothing like it. The movie is excellent. The book is okay.
Okay.
But for the most part, we lose so much of the nuances of books when they go to the screen. I think it's interesting. So often I've read a book and then I've seen an adaptation. And, well, if I see it soon after I've read it and I have these expectations of how things should be. But it's interesting sometimes to see the movie version first.
Mm-hmm.
And often I find myself, I'm more open to the movie and can enjoy it. And then if I read the book afterwards, okay, well, this was different, but both were good. A great example, here we go, Stephen King again. Stephen King famously hates the movie adaptation of The Shining, but it's so good. Is it exactly like the book? No, it is not, but it's so good. And it's almost, here's the embryo in the womb, and then they split off and become their own things.
Well, and between the way a book is consumed and a movie is consumed, they are two very different mediums. So sometimes the guts of the story may be there, that's the same, but there are certain things that have to be kind of changed just from the medium standpoint of how we're consuming it is changing. I'm a huge fan of Phantom of the Opera, for instance, and I love the book and I love the musical, but the two, like, rarely, there's some pieces that line up, but there's not a lot that kind of line up between the two. You can see segments in the musical that kind of match up to the book, but there's a big gap between them too as well. I think it's just because how the medium that you're approaching it with, it kind of changes and evolves the story.
Absolutely. And I think that maybe the reason that in particular Frankenstein leans on the monster or the creature being a monster, a scary monster in the movie versions is that that's an easier sell. People want a monster movie. They're not necessarily interested in finding out who he is beyond the exterior, versus in a book, readers maybe are more open to that. But I do think there's been a lot of scholarship on really examining the creature as this character with depth. And also I think that in the past 20 years or so, we've had so many more examples of these shades of gray character. I don't want to say morally gray because that just makes me think of trashy romance books, whatever. That's just not my thing. Okay. It is not my thing. I should not judge anybody who likes that stuff, but it's just not for me. But we have characters like Dexter Morgan, where Dexter has some things about him. In some ways, he's a very good man, but also he's a monster. He kills people. He goes beyond laws and what's considered right. And he doesn't always kill the right people. And so that's just one of many. Or here's another one, not horror, but Omar from The Wire. Did you watch The Wire, Brad?
No, I have not watched The Wire.
It is worth it. Trust me.
I'm blasting through Buffy right now. So.
Okay, that's fine. I did that back in the late 90s. I went through Buffy.
I was having a conversation. I don't remember who I was talking to on the podcast. Buffy comes up a couple times. And I realized, I think it's always around like season 3 or 4 that I always kind of phase out. And so I'm like, nope, this time I'm going to power through. So I'm just kind of at the beginning of season 2 right now. The last episode I watched was the intro to Spike.
And fun.
Yeah. So The Wire. So I need to watch The Wire now, huh? I need to add it to my list.
Yes. Season 4 of The Wire was my favorite because it takes place, it's been so long since I watched it, but I do remember season 4. A lot of it takes place in schools, and some schools resemble schools in which I taught. So it's just has a whole meaning for me, but it's a wonderful show. Excellent acting, writing, directing. It's so good. But Omar is a great example of a character where he's a drug dealer. He murders people. He does these bad things, but he also has a code, and he's not going to harm an innocent person. He's only going to be violent with people in the game. So a very different show than Buffy, but definitely one worth your time.
I'll have to add that one to my list.
Yes.
I do like rewatching a lot of the shows that have come out and have already ended, because then with those, it's like, okay, well, it's like reading a novel. You can see where the end is. And so, you can, Buffy, I know there's X number of seasons, so I can just get to the end of it and I'm on to the next.
Now, are you watching From?
No, I am not.
Okay. Seriously, that is the best show that's on TV. And I am a TV connoisseur. I never just turn on TV to see what's on. I am purposeful about my TV viewing. That is the best show on TV. It's excellent. It is completely worth the
Wire and From.
Yeah.
All right. So I will have to add those to my watch list.
Yes.
Which is quite terrible already in the number of shows and stuff that I watch. I think somewhere in here I got it right.
Yeah. But From is horror. So you can feel like, I personally, when I'm writing,
I'm getting inspiration.
Yeah. Well, so for example, when I was writing Darkness There But Something More, and there are sororities involved and hazing, I was watching movies about that. I was reading books about that. And so even when I wasn't writing, and I do that because I'm trying to see what all's out there. I'm learning about different things. I'm also reading nonfiction articles, but my head is staying in the game even when I'm not writing. So that's how I view TV viewing as working on writing.
That's a very academically driven justification to watch TV. So I enjoy that.
I'm very good at justifying certain behaviors.
All right. So outside of writing, what are some of your other hobbies?
I love to travel. So I recently visited Austria and Slovenia. I've been to Austria before, but altogether I've been to 67 countries. My goal is 100. So I am 2/3 of the way there. I have not, however, visited all the states like you have. I know Alaska is your last one. It's so exciting.
I know. I've already, whenever we took the cruise in June, it's our first stop. I always said, I'm going to jump off and take a picture right there and be like, that's it. Number 50.
States. Yeah, that's amazing. So maybe I'll do that after I hit 100 countries. But my thing is that I stay in Bloomsburg during a semester. I really am just at work and at home where I'm working almost all the time. Very rarely do I go outside of Bloomsburg. So then when it's not a semester, when it's a break, I get to just leave the country and go somewhere wild like Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. That was part of last summer's trip. And I love travel and I love bringing it into my writing. So again, my writing is very Pennsylvania centric overall for long fiction, but for short fiction, for short stories, I have short stories that take place in all kinds of places. And I just really like to play around with that. My most recent short story I completed was called Brotherhood in the Bone House. It is based on a place that I visited in Austria, which is a bone house, Beinhaus, also known as a charnel house, where they keep skulls and bones. And so I took that idea and played with it a little bit. And so it takes place in a fictional town in Austria, but it's in Austria. So I have stories in Greece and Bolivia and Tanzania and Egypt and just all kinds of different places, because that's something I can share. And I make up lots of stuff, but when it comes to a setting, I do like to ground that setting in reality. So other hobbies, I don't know, writing, traveling, watching movies. I do like movies. I went to the movie theater 20 times last year. 17 of those movies were horror. Threw a few others in there too, but going to see Hokum tomorrow, and I'm very excited about it. I love reading. I read a lot. I read when I'm on the elliptical, so that way it's allowed because I have to work out. So therefore, it's allowed. It's fine that I'm reading because I'm working out. So I'll be reading tomorrow morning. Yeah, during my workout.
So any lasting advice for aspiring authors?
Yes. First of all, don't say that you want to write. Stop saying, oh, I'm going to write. I would write, but this. We do have time, even when we're busy. We take time to watch our favorite show. We take time to go get a coffee from Starbucks. And that time we can harness in different ways if our writing is important to us. So one thing is just the only person standing in the way of your writing really is you. Sure, you can say, oh, this person needs this person needs this, but you are the one who controls your every waking moment. And so stop talking about saying you're going to write and just sit down, get your butt in the seat, whatever works for you, stand up on a standing desk, I don't care. Write on a pen and paper, write on a laptop, write on an old-fashioned typewriter, whatever the heck you do. But you need to get words on the page. And when people say, oh, I have this great idea, write it down. Don't just talk about it. Because words on the page, even if they're garbage, there's something. I always imagine ideas are kind of like butterflies and they're just flying all around and they might just fly away. And they're not worth anything if they're just flying around. They only are real. You make them concrete by putting them on the page. So that's one thing. And the second thing is, for the love of God, oh my gosh, get some sort of writing community, share your work with people, get some feedback, offer to give feedback in return. Because if the only person who's ever going to read your work is an editor somewhere, it probably hasn't had enough eyes on it to go to that editor to be successful. So community and no more excuses. And I read an article last semester about just that idea of time where we think, oh, well, I need like 5 hours. No, who has 5 hours? But you know what you have? You have 20 minutes right now. Okay, you're not going to write 15 pages, but maybe you'll write 200 words. And that matters. What's his name? George R.R. Martin. We know how his books are crazy long. He apparently, his writing goal was 150 words a day. That's it. But you put enough of those days together, and even that small output adds up. So that's my advice. Stop making excuses, find your people, and start writing. And then revise the darn thing. Something that grinds my gears is when people say, oh, well, I wrote it the way I wanted the first time. I don't revise. Well,
you didn't.
Yeah. Then your work is not going to be as good as it can be. And maybe it's very good, but you can make it better. The first try for writing, I just don't ever think gets it right. Even Martin Luther King Jr., the big I Have a Dream speech, very famously, the speech that we know is a very, very revised version. He gave different versions of that speech at different points, and he only got it right that last time. Revise.
All right. Yeah, some great advice. All right. So, as we're wrapping up, so where can, I don't know, probably both of my listeners right now, learn more about you? Where can we find your books? All that kind of stuff.
All of my books are on Amazon, and I mostly talked about Darkness There, but something more. And I mentioned Close the Door and Lake of Secrets, but I also have one for younger readers, middle grade. It's called The Hidden Diary. It is a paranormal mystery. I have another short story collection besides Prepare the Coffin. It's called Keeper of Corpses and Other Dark Tales. Brad, your name is on the cover.
It is. I have a quote. I was an ARC for that one.
Do. Yeah. Yeah, it's good. Right on the cover. And then I also have I have the Dark and Dreary, a basement horror anthology, and then 2 chapbooks. One is a Christmas book, It Crept from the Stocking, horror, and one is Slasher Safari. It's a slasher, and it takes place on a safari, just in case you couldn't figure out that complicated title. So everything is available on Amazon. Most of that is available on Barnes & Noble. I'm on Instagram at CO Sachar, Sachar, and I'm on Facebook, just my whole long name.
Well, and I'll make sure and get all the links from you so I'll put those in the show notes. So if you're definitely recommend picking up Cassandra's books. They are amazing. Her short stories are awesome. So is, Darkness There, but something more, because I know that one was a fun read for me. And I know if Keeper of Corpses was also really, really great. I said your short stories are awesome. So definitely pick up her stuff. And, with that, we'll close out for the night. I appreciate you, hanging out and chatting with me for a bit. And so I will, let you get back on to your evening. So
thank you very much, Brad.
No problem. Thanks so much. That's it for the Night Crew podcast and my conversation with Cassandra O'Sullivan Sachar. I have links to where you can find Cassandra in the show notes. Follow her on all the socials and pick up her books. They're good stuff. So if you had a good time, make sure to follow the show, share it with a friend, and leave a rating. Hopefully that wonderful 5 stars. If you want updates on my writing, go join my new Facebook group, Brad Rix's Book Crypt. I put a lot of stuff out there. You can also get copies of my novels wherever you like to buy books. But if you hop over to my website, bradrix.com, you can purchase signed copies and get yourself some t-shirts. I'm Brad Rix, reminding you to stay out of graveyards after dark, question people who don't show up in mirrors, and remember that even in the darkness, there could be something more. Until next time, keep your curtains drawn, your sense of humor sharp, and your blood inside your body. Thanks for listening.